She wanted her nanny to walk her down the aisle because that's how close they were. She had both parents work bizarre hours and says that she was raised by the nanny, but questions only if it altered her relationship to her mom, not her dad. By prioritizing your career or yourself, are you giving your child a better life or one full of resentment? And why have kids at all if you're just going to dump them on the nanny? Today, let's get into the topic of raised by the nanny, what it means, and can it be a good thing?
Big monkey on the TV, but who comes to see you tomorrow? Roger, what will make you happy this morning? Who do you think is here?
Ideally, the presence of a nanny is a new relationship which is additive to a child's life, someone else to love and care for them. But sometimes it can lead to a comparison trap when bundled together with time spent away from caretakers, the absence of nurturing qualities in those same caretakers, and additional expectations of what a relationship to your mom or dad should look like. We might see that gratitude and happiness disappear or not show up at all. Let's start by hashing out what it means to be raised by the nanny, because we're not debating kind of homeschool life here. Raised by the nanny generally means that the nanny is around for longer than the typical workday. So in the morning, she might be there early to help make breakfast and get the kids off to school. She might also be a live-in nanny. And in the evening, she might be shuttling them to and from different extracurriculars, preparing dinner, and getting them ready for bed into PJs. Parents might be working a demanding job or multiple jobs. They might not be around for night shifts, or they might be around in tandem around the house with other kids or juggling other responsibilities. One parent described her situation in a help column to the Washington Post. Last year, the work hours for my husband and I changed, and we decided that a live-in nanny would be best for childcare. Our nanny is a lovely girl and we enjoy having her, but over time, my kids, 2 and 7, have definitely started to prefer her. They get so excited when she walks through our door, and when they have bad dreams at night, they go to her room instead of ours. Part of that is because my husband and I are often gone at night. My 2-year-old has started saying, "I don't want mommy, I want Allie." I know I shouldn't take this personally. My 2-year-old spends all day with our nanny, and our 7-year-old sees her a lot too. But this is getting tough for me and my husband. How can we reconnect with our kids, especially when we already spend so much time away from them at work? The journalist responding to this article is author Meghan Leahy, who writes parenting-related articles for The Post and is also author of the book Parenting Outside the Lines. Interestingly, she responds by reframing the question away from the comparison trap and the battle between parent and nanny by stating bluntly, though watching your child connect to another caregiver might be uncomfortable, these connections should be seen as a benefit, not a problem. I wish more kids could have many loving people guiding them, hired or not. She redirects the parent to ask themselves, how can we reconnect with our kids, especially when we spend so much time at work? And she also adds, I have coached and known plenty of parents who spend all day and night with their children, and yet these parents are emotionally distant, discontent, and poorly attached to their children. The fact is, nannies are professional caretakers. Because this is their primary job, let's just put it out there, they might be really good at it. It's not their first rodeo. They might be more adept at setting boundaries, finding engaging activities for the child, and otherwise emotionally connecting to this small person. They're also paid to spend that many hours one-on-one, face-to-face with the child. And that combines with selection and survivorship bias, where the people who choose to be nannies might naturally be more maternal or more excited about caregiving for children. Assuming we have a loving and present nanny, what's the problem? It appears to stem from how the child interprets the presence of this alternate caretaker. And the word interprets is very important here because, like all things in life, it's not about what happens to you, but how you find meaning in that event. When the parents are away from home a lot, does the child say, my parents are working really hard to provide for us? Or does the child say, my parents are not prioritizing me? Or they're prioritizing their careers over me? Same situation, but very different interpretations. So what is it? Is it self-sacrifice or is it selfishness? And can we, influence that narrative.
When you work for me, you leave when I say you can leave.
For your information, I do not work for you. I am employed by your mother.
Oh, yeah? Take a look around. Do you see her anywhere? News flash. You're not gonna. Unless you make an appointment with her assistant or hang around her bedroom door at 3 o'clock in the morning. In the meantime, you're working for me.
Oh, is that so?
Uh-huh.
News flash, Mussolini. I quit!
Swinging door.
There is no randomized controlled trial for this, but we have certain sociological labs and storytelling advocates, underscoring the importance of not letting kids decide which way to interpret these kinds of statements. These nudges look like micro changes. So for example, instead of "I have to do something really important, I can't go to your soccer game, you know I'm so busy," reframing, starting off by that point of connection, "I'm so sad I can't come to your soccer game. It's really important to you. How can we make it up next weekend?" There are a couple of points embedded in this single suggestion. It's very easy to get defensive, especially when you're working very long hours, but that point of connecting to the child is super important here. And the second point is carving out an alternate space where you can make that commitment and not go back on it. And it just comes down to having space and time for those conversations to happen so you can unwind what is the child thinking about, how can I shape their interpretation, or maybe give them some pointers if they are not seeing what I'm seeing.
I'm one of 6 kids. My mom's a full-time ER nurse. Both of my parents work full-time jobs. So I feel like they sacrificed a lot. I sacrificed a lot. I do a lot of it for.
Yeah, because sometimes you hear the stories of child stars and what happens, but it sounds like the grounding of your mom and dad.
Yeah, that was never me.
Immigrant parents, like, they're so used to work hard, work hard, work hard. It's not a work smart type of thing. They're more like, mátanos en el trabajo.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm not trying to matarme en el trabajo.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to make money and work less. Because I grew up watching my mom work a lot. Watching her struggle made me want to move a different route. Like, okay, you know what? I don't want to do that. I don't want to leave my kids to grow up, raising themselves.
Being a nanny is a very intimate job, and some people argue that it has to be intimate because if the child knows that it is just hired help, they may act out and refuse discipline. Many nannies say they don't worry about replacing the parents because they say the kids know who their parents are. So if the kids aren't confused, let's talk about expectations. What are they expecting of their real parents? And clearly, whether or not that's societally ingrained, there are different expectations of mothers versus fathers. One thing to observe about these posts is that the recollection from the kids is asking for very specific things. Kids are not asking for their parents to sit next to them for 8 hours a day. Even kids as young as 2 or 18 months old will wander away from the parent to have all the fun they want and then look back to see if the parent is there and come back to their home base. Reading through the experiences of people who say they were raised by the nanny, they didn't have that home base in their parent. So for the nanny issue to really be a problem, there needs to be 2 things. One is the theme of the parents not having time, and more importantly, the child not connecting to the parent in the way that they desire, which creates a wall. And the second piece is likely so much more important because there are plenty of stay-at-home parents or parents with more flexible schedules that also struggle to connect with their child. To be honest, it's also a huge personality issue. The fact is, anyone can become a parent, and we know that in the real world, there are a ton of people and a lot of partners even who are not great listeners, and it's hard to connect to those people. So when it comes to children, there has to be an added effort of meeting them where they are at because it is worth this investment. Not necessarily for retirement, but so that you have a good relationship with your kids as they're growing up and maybe even grandchildren. Back to the mom part. Is there a difference between a job that the nanny does and that of the mother? For her Columbia University master's thesis, graduate student Courtney interviewed career nannies in the New York City area. She writes, "I came to understand early in the conceptual phase of the project that the work of nannying could not be separated from mothering. When asked to state the difference between the work of nannying and mothering, most interviewees, many of them mothers themselves, stated that there was no difference." She also writes a shattering thought. Is a nanny a mother? And can she occupy this role without displacing another mother? Later in her discourse, she quotes from Andrea O'Reilly's Toni Morrison and Motherhood. a politics of the heart. Morrison defines maternal identity as a site of power for Black women that has its explicit goal the empowerment of children. And that's very interesting when you juxtapose those two statements. Is a nanny a mother? A mother is about empowering. It becomes apparent that the question of is a nanny a mother is one for the ego, in the same category of who do you love more, mom or dad, or will you miss me when I'm gone? It's a question for the ego because either she is not and I win, or she is and I deflate. But if you add that angle of child empowerment, the more fruitful and loving relationships a parent can provide for a child, the more secure and confident that child will be. So the question, is a nanny a mother, ultimately never needs to be asked and never needs to be answered. We are a collective of adults aimed at empowering children, and the primary responsibility for that empowerment is on the parents. The caveat to add here is that because the role of nanny and mother are so intertwined, the comparison trap is much closer for moms than it is for dads. If children are feeling separation, they are more likely to feel it from the mom because of the presence of the nanny and because they would expect those same nurturing qualities from their mother, making it much easier to construct the image of what I wish my mother did for me, as opposed to a male figure who would be the parallel for a father. Ultimately, is it about learning the child's love language, communication language? More broadly, it comes down to listening and intentional spaces, carving out time when you can, and closely listening to how the child is interpreting the world around them. Children clearly want parents to be a part of their lives, and that also invites the parent's ability to influence their perspective. And that door, that invite, has to be kept open intentionally. Parental authority doesn't last past age 18, and if we're honest, it doesn't go much farther than age 13 or 14. But influence is an open door that lasts a lifetime.